welcome back to Tech Diffuse. This is Michael, your host, and today I want to show you how you can use lists in Python. First, we have to know why do we need lists in programming. So obviously lists are everywhere. I mean, if you make a Google search or search on Amazon or eBay, you have always elements in an ordered way. So these are list elements in a list. And the interesting thing of lists is you can add elements to a list, you can remove elements of a list, you can exchange elements in a list, you can rotate a list, so make the first element the last element, and make the last element the first element. You can get the amount of elements in the list with the length function, and so on. And the purpose of this video is to show you that it is very easy in Python to handle all those things in lists that I just covered. And even for a total beginner, it is very easy and just with a few lines of code. And now I want to show you how you can handle those things in Python. So first up, we create a list. The creation of list in Python is very easy. You just write a variable name, the equal sign, you make square brackets, and you write elements comma separated. In case of integers, you just write an integer, comma separated, and the next integer, and so on. In the case of chars, you just write your square brackets, you make a char, comma separation, next char, and so on. And then we have a print statement, and we print out this variable. As you can see, creating lists in Python is really that easy. So let's try to implement this. Okay, so let's see how we can create those lists. As I said, in Python it's pretty easy. We start by writing the variable name. So our variable is a list of squares. We have our variables, we have our squared brackets, and we have the squares. So the first square is obviously the 1. Then we have a comma separation, and the second square is a 4. So 1 squared 1 is 1, 2 squared 2 is 4, and 3 squared 3 is 9, and 4 squared 4 is 16, 5 squared 5 is 25. So much for that. So, and as you can see, our list is already finished. We just have our squared brackets and the elements. So you can go now, print squares, and you have everything in place. That's pretty much it for creating lists. In the same way, you obviously can create lists with strings, as I show you now. So we create a variable again. We have our string list, and we make quotes, and we say something like this: string 1, string 2, string 3, and string 4. And we print it out again, our string list, and there you go. We have a list with strings. As you can see, also this is extremely easy in Python. And in the same way, you can also create mixed lists. So extremely easy, we create a mixed list, and our first element is an integer. The second element is a string. The third element is an integer once again. And the fourth element can be a char with single quotes. So we print it out, mixed list, and there you go. We have our mixed lists of strings, integers, and a char. Very easy in Python. If you want to get a certain element of the list, we can use indexing. So it's pretty much the same as in indexing with strings. So this means, for instance, we want to get the second element. The second element has the index 1. Remember, we count with 0, so 0, 1. And we just can say we have squares at the index 1. And we make a print statement, and we print it out. And there you can see we have the 4. So it's the second number at the index 1. Extremely easy. And the same thing works with negative indexes. So we have square -1, for instance. We run it and we have 25. So again, remember the last value of a word, or in this case the last value of a list, and you can get with -1. So this is like getting the element from behind. So if you make -2, you get the previous element, 16. Pretty easy. And in this case, you can make something like this. 3 and -2 and 3 are the same element, the 16. So the 3 is from the front. So we have index 0, 1, 2, and 3, 16. And -2 is like -1, -2, also 16. Pretty easy in Python. And the same goes for slicing. As I also told you in the last video, a slicing of strings. So you can say squares, and you can create something like this. So you make a slice without putting a number in front or behind. What this means is, if you remember, if we don't put a number in front, it defaults to 0. And if we don't put a number in the back, it defaults to length of the string, or in this case, length of the list. So this is pretty much the same like we write 0 and length of squares. And if we run it, you see, we have both times printed out the complete list. So a nice feature. Slicing also works on lists in Python. And of course, instead of printing out the complete list, you can get yourself a sublist of a list. So if I take this squares example and make a 0 in front to make it more clear, and add a 2 here, we execute it and we have the sublist 1 and 4. And again, it's the same thing as in strings. The first value is included, the second value is excluded. So in this case, we have the 1 included, index 0, the 4 included, index 1, and the 9 excluded, index 2. So when you give 0 to 2, we have 1, 4, 9, but the last one is excluded. Pretty simple. And of course, the same thing is possible for other numbers. If you put in a 1 here, we start with 4, and here you can put a 3, for example, and we have 4 and 9. So it's a sublist inside of a list. Very easy. And also extremely easy is to add elements to an existing list. So it is just writing the list plus another list. So to add the correct numbers, we have the squares. We ended with 5. 5 times 5 is 25. And we make here 6 times 6 is 36. And 7 times 7 is 49. And we make a new variable. So we call it like squares plus. So we have the result of squares plus this part in squares plus, and we can print it and execute it, and there we have our new list printed out. So again, extremely easy to concatenate lists in Python. So one thing I want to mention is that strings are immutable, but lists are mutable. So what does this mean? Imagine we have a string. We have a string. We print it out. Word, string, okay. We know how to do indexing. As I said, instead, for instance, we want to have the char at the index 1. We execute and we have the t, okay. So, but if we want to replace this char, so we say word at index 1 is like a p, for instance. We execute it and we get an error. This object does not support item assignment. So this means that strings are not mutable, they are immutable. So once you have created a string, you cannot change it. And I mean, you can get a new string to Word, but this string is, once the string value is connected to the word, you cannot change it in a way you want to do with indexing. This is not possible. But, as I said, it is possible with lists. So, for instance, we have our list. We take this from above here. We print it out, just to be sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to comment that out. So we print it out. 1, 2, 3, 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. And we want to, let's say, change the last value. So then we take the index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This means squares at 4. And we change the value to like 66, something like that. We print the list out, and there you go. We have the new list 1, 4, 9, 16, and 66. So we exchanged the last value. And this is very important. So strings are immutable, but lists are definitely mutable. So you can change a list. This is very important and a very obvious task and very easy to do. And because of lists are mutable, you can easily append values. What I mean by that? So we already saw how we can create a new list. In this example, we can make squares plus another list and then have a new list. But this is not really appending. This is really creating a new list out of an existing list. But because they are immutable, you can really create a new list out of the existing list. So we have a list. We make this example go away. We have a list as before, and we use the function append. So as we imagine, it's really like a spoken language. We have squares and we append something. And what one we append? In this case, let's say 6, 36, and we have now appended it. We can create the print statements, and there you go. We have the exact same list, squares appended, a value. Pretty easy. So another thing I want to show you is how you can change a sublist. I showed you before with slicing, you can retrieve a sublist of a list, but now we take it a step further. We not only retrieve a sublist from a list, but we interchange the elements in the list. For this example, I use a list of letters. So we have a list of letters. Yes, like A, B, C, D, E, C, F, and G. So let's print it out. Letters. There's a list of letters, and now let's interchange the variables. So first of all, we retrieve the sublist. Okay, we have our letters. We use the slicing from before, and we want to change the letters from 2 to 4. Let's print them. So the letters from 2 to 4 are C and D. So it's this sublist. And what we can do now is we can take this and make an equal sign and just replace them. So we want to replace them with capital letters, C and D. All right, so we have just created a new list and put those lists onto the letters list at this slicing part. And if we print it out now and execute, and there you go, we have the same list as before, but we changed exactly this part with C and D as we did here. So also, changing parts of a list is extremely easy in Python. You won't see this in another programming language. And on the same way, you can also remove this part of the list. So just like before, we do the slicing, and instead of putting elements into the list, we can just say empty list. And empty list is nothing else than removing elements of this list. So if I execute, there you go. The letters C, D we have reached with the slicing from 2 to 4 are now replaced with nothing. And replaced with nothing equals we deleted it. So also extremely easy to get rid of elements inside a list. And one last extremely cool feature of lists in Python is how you can nest lists one in another. And this is what I'm going to show you now. So imagine we have a list A, and the list comprises just of chars. So we have A, we have B, and we have C. We print out ABC. We have a second list, and it comprises of integers, so 1, 2, 3. We print out ABC and 1, 2, 3. So far nothing special. And now we create a new list with these two lists inside. So we have our outer list, same as before, and we put now A and N inside this. So we have this list A put inside outer list and list N put inside outer list. And the result looks like this. So we have a list surrounding the two lists. So don't get confused now. This looks a bit weird, but actually this is pretty common in programming. Usually you have complex elements like lists or maps or some objects inside of a list. So this is a real typical use case, and again, it's extremely easy to retrieve to get this in Python working. So keep that in mind. And also extremely easy is how you can retrieve elements of this structure. What I mean by that? For instance, we have this structure with lists in lists. For example, we want to get only the first element of the outer list. So the first element of the outer list is at index 0, as always. And the first element is nothing else than the first list. So we have the list ABC, and if we print 0, this is exactly what we get. So the same thing is if we put the 1 here, we get the second list, 1, 2, 3. So with 0, ABC, with the second element at index 1, 1, 2, 3. And we can even put this further. Imagine we want to get the first element of the first list. What we can do now, we still take this outer list 1 and we make another squared brackets and make again 1. So this means we take the outer list, we get the first element of the outer list is this first list, and the first element of this list is the 0, is the A. So if you print it out, there you go, we get the A. Extremely easy in Python. And the same thing goes for the second list. For instance, if we have the second list, the 1, 2, 3, and we get the second element, you guess what? What should we do now? We take the second list, index 1. We want the second element at index 1. We make 1, 1. And there you go, we have the 2. So, second element of the outer list and second element of the inside list. It can't get much easier than in Python. If you have followed me this far, congratulations. This is usually the first time when new programmers feel a bit weird because it's getting a little bit more complex, but actually it is not. So once again, congratulations. So let me do a conclusion of what we have learned. We have learned today how you can create lists, how you can add elements to lists, how you can create lists with integers, how you can create lists with strings and chars, how you can get single elements from a list, how you can get a substring from how you can get a sublist from a list, how you can change a sublist in a list, how you can create lists in lists, so-called nested lists, how you can retrieve elements from nested lists. Everything in Python, everything super easy. So once again, thank you for getting here. If you got to here, you're on a very good way to become an extremely good programmer. Thanks you. Alright guys, so thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. This would be highly appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.